You trip. Maybe it's a curb you didn't see, or a step that wasn't where you thought. For a split second your whole body panics, arms flailing, and then you catch yourself. And you laugh it off. Because deep down you know that even if it had gone wrong, even if you'd landed badly and snapped something, you'd be fine. Hospital. X-ray. A cast. A few weeks of complaining. But that safety net is brand new. And the instinct behind it is ancient. Surviving a broken bone is one of the oldest human achievements there is. It's older than hospitals, older than doctors, older than the wheel, older than the first written word that ever tried to describe pain. Our ancestors were breaking bones and living long before any of that existed. So here's the real question. Out there, no surgeons, no painkillers, no x-rays, and a very short list of things that would happily eat a limping human. How on earth did you survive a broken leg? To answer that, we have to start with the most important tool in the whole story. And it's not a splint, or a doctor, or a clever trick. It's the bone itself. Because here's something people forget: bone is alive. It's not a dry stick inside you. It's living tissue, laced with blood vessels and cells, and it has an almost magical power. It can rebuild itself. Break a bone, and within hours your body floods the site with blood, then starts laying down a soft, lumpy bridge of new tissue called a callus. Over weeks, that soft bridge hardens into fresh bone. Given time, the break doesn't just heal. It can end up stronger at the point where it snapped. That's the base technology. Evolution handed it to us for free. But there's a catch. A brutal one. Time. A serious leg fracture takes around 6 weeks just to get stable, and months before it can carry real weight. And in the ancient world, 6 weeks of not being able to walk was basically a death sentence. You couldn't hunt. You couldn't gather. You couldn't run from anything that wanted you dead. You couldn't even get to water. So the body can heal the bone. But the body can't feed itself while it does. Which means the real answer to how did they survive was never about medicine at all. It was about who was standing next to you. And this is where the story gets genuinely moving. There's an idea that gets passed around in anthropology, often linked to the researcher Margaret Mead, though honestly, nobody can pin down if she ever really said it. The story goes like this. A student asks what the earliest sign of civilization is. And the answer isn't a tool, or a pot, or a weapon. It's a healed thigh bone. Here's the logic. In the wild, an animal that breaks its leg dies. It can't flee, can't drink, can't feed. So if you find an ancient human skeleton with a femur that broke and then healed, smooth, fused, mended, you're not just looking at a bone. You're looking at proof that somebody else stayed. Somebody carried them to safety. Somebody brought them food and water for weeks. Somebody chose not to leave the weakest member of the group behind. A healed bone is a fossil of kindness. And we've actually found them. Go to Shanidar Cave, in the mountains of northern Iraq, where the researcher Ralph Seletsky excavated a group of Neanderthals tens of thousands of years old. One of them, nicknamed Nandi, is famous. This individual had survived a catalog of horrific injuries: a crushed and withered arm, damage to the leg and foot, and likely blindness in one eye. And every one of those injuries showed signs of healing. He lived for years like that. A half-blind Neanderthal with one working arm did not survive the Ice Age on his own. Somebody looked after him. And here's what makes this so important, because it flips the whole thing on its head. We tend to think of ancient survival as pure ruthlessness. Survival of the fittest, every creature for itself. But the broken leg tells the opposite story. Our real superpower was never claws or speed. It was that we took care of each other. Compassion wasn't a soft add-on that came later with religion and philosophy. Compassion was survival tech. It's arguably the thing that made us a species worth calling human in the first place. Think about that. The first medicine was just another person deciding you were worth keeping alive. But of course, we didn't stop at be nice and wait. Over time, humans got a lot more hands-on, and they figured out something crucial. A bone heals best when the broken ends are held straight and still. So they invented the splint. Go to ancient Egypt, around 4,500 years ago, and you find the proof in the ground. Archaeologists have discovered mummified remains with actual splints still attached, pieces of wood or tree bark, carefully padded with linen and bandage tied around a broken limb. Someone, thousands of years ago, understood the exact principle we still use today. Line the bone up, wrap it snug, keep it from moving, let biology do the rest. The Egyptians even wrote it down. There's a document called the Edwin Smith Papyrus, one of the oldest medical texts on Earth, and it describes examining and managing fractures with a calm, clinical eye that feels startlingly modern. No magic spells for these injuries. Just observation and care. Then the Greeks turned it into a science. Around 2,500 years ago, Hippocrates. Yeah, that Hippocrates wrote in detail about setting broken bones. He understood traction, the trick of gently pulling a limb to coax the shattered ends back into their proper place before immobilizing it. He even designed a special wooden bench with rollers and levers to stretch a patient's body and reset serious fractures and dislocations. It looks, frankly, a little terrifying. But the underlying method, pull a line, hold still, is exactly what an emergency room does today. And that basic idea just kept getting refined. Better padding. Better bandaging. Eventually, much later, someone figured out you could wrap a limb in bandages soaked in plaster that hardens into a rigid shell. The plaster cast, the direct ancestor of the fiberglass one they'd slap on your arm now. But every single one of those upgrades is just a better version of the same two-part idea our ancestors cracked long ago. Hold the bone still. And don't let the person face it alone. So here's the full picture. First, the bone healed itself, living tissue, quietly rebuilding. Then someone stayed behind to feed the person while it did. Then a half-blind Neanderthal survived years he had no business surviving, because his group refused to leave him. Then the Egyptians wrapped the leg in bark and linen. Then Hippocrates learned to pull it straight. Then, eventually, we poured the whole thing in plaster. Thousands of years of progress. And it all rests on that first ancient decision. The decision to catch someone when they fall. Which brings us right back to you, tripping over that curb. That flash of fear you feel, and then the certainty that you'd be okay. That certainty isn't just modern medicine. It's 100,000 years old. It's every ancestor who ever stayed, who ever carried, who ever sat with a hurt person and waited out the weeks. You come from a very long line of people who decided the wounded were worth saving. And that might be the most human thing we ever did. We didn't survive because we were the strongest. We survived because when one of us went down, we didn't run. If this is the kind of thing your brain likes to chew on, there's a lot more where it came from. Stick around.